a major event to launch George Bush onto the world stage. Well, when 9/11 went down, as it happens, I was also scheduled to leave Belize, and I was on the first flight out of Belize after 9/11. But that was my trigger. That was what, if you like, was the catalyst to take me back into the real world. And I decided at that point that, now was my time to come out of my cave, come out of my reclusion, and try and find a way to incorporate my newfound knowledge, hopefully apply some wisdom to that knowledge, and share what I learned, but find a way to share it so that I wasn't dismissed as a complete out-and-out crank. And as you now know, I mean, much of my work is spent literally at the front end of exposing the geopolitical agendas.
Yes.
And looking at the hard facts of that. And then part of my other work is looking at the more esoteric and occult aspects of what is occurring in the geopolitical realm. And there's no doubt in my mind that if somebody goes into this, without a good foundation, then there's a number of ways in which they may come out of the journey, without, how should I say, sufficient awareness to be able to understand how they are perceived within the wider community. Now, one example of this, of course, is David Shayler.
Right.
Who Rick also referenced, because Rick was also at the Glastonbury Symposium, because David Shayler was on platform immediately after me last year, when David Shayler declared himself to be the reincarnation of the Messiah.
That is interesting, actually, in one way. Yes, okay.
So here is David, and David to this day is still adamant that he is the Messiah. But hey, that's another discussion.
Yes.
But Stuart Wilde, who I have a lot of respect for, and a lot of respect for the research that he has put together, and I mean, he himself has been through this process, and he identifies that one of the manifestations of this journey, if you don't properly integrate the process, is that you have this Messiah complex. He also identifies that another manifestation, if you're not able to integrate the information and knowledge that you are accruing during this process, is suicide. So there is no question that if you're coming into this realm of research and study, one has to acknowledge that it's a bit like a dangerous sport. And like any dangerous sport, if you train, and if you go through the appropriate preparation, then it's not dangerous.
Right.
But if you go for shortcuts, then basically you run the risk, obviously, of doing yourself a serious injury. I think another analogy, Henrik, is that let's equate this to, say, learning something like a martial art. You don't become a black belt in 5 minutes.
Right, exactly.
The body, the physical vehicle, the emotion, the spiritual, the intellectual, all has to go through a process of learning and development, which is carefully structured and obviously follows a pattern that's been developed over probably a few millennia. And then it's only at some eventual juncture that a person becomes a black belt and then perhaps moves on to the various Dan grades, etc. Yes. And I think although we don't have any obviously formal structure to this process,
exactly.
And God forbid, that's not the purpose at all. But nonetheless, I mean, I think we have to be cognizant that this has to be taken at an appropriate pace.
Yes, I think you're right there, and I've talked with other friends about that as well. That this, I mean, there isn't never going to be a structure within this, because again, this, if we even can call it a community or a research group or people that are interested in somewhat similar areas. This is not a school. This is not formal. It's not going to be structured in that way, and that means that you yourself are your only kind of in one way teacher and guide, if you will. You are the one who have to keep track on how much you're taking in and at what pace and what is good for you as a person, what you can deal with and so forth. I mean, my recipe, so to speak, for how to do this is on a very kind of human and a very basic level. I mentioned it before, but just the idea of kind of keeping a healthy kind of detachment from it, a balance, the importance of disconnecting from the subject matter, having a laugh, having a few drinks, as I said before, go out into nature and play, create and paint and draw, laugh, That's my kind of recipe. What do you think, Ian?
I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I have a very supportive partner. I have my kids. And I lead a normal life in that respect. But obviously, once I step out of that normal life, I'm researching in realms that are considered anything but normal.
Yes.
And interestingly, I gave a presentation on the more mundane issue, actually, of the myth of peak oil. Just a couple of days ago in the the northwest of England. And this gentleman came up to me afterwards, and he said, Ian, I've been following your work. And this guy is in his 60s. And he said, I have been regarded as sick for the last 30 years. He said, I've been signed off work for 30 years. I receive benefit from the government because I can't work. And he said, and the only reason I can't work is because I was seeing everything that you're seeing 30 years ago. And I couldn't adapt to working in society. So they tried to put me on antidepressants.
Oh, really?
And he said, I fought that. He said, but what he notices now, fortunately, is that there are more and more people, and now he's part of a small community. They don't live together, but it's a group of friends, if you like, who he can relate to. And I think this is another part of keeping this in perspective. It's finding other people, whether it's individuals or within groups or whatever, who you can discuss these issues with. And in fact, I listened to a piece of the discussion you had with Neil Kramer, I think last week.
Yes.
And in that discussion, I think Neil mentioned that more and more people are finding it difficult to relate to the people that they work with or even their family. And there is no question. I mean, over the last few years, there have been a phenomenal increase in sort of divorces and separations as one partner taps into this journey and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
And so consequently, they sort of move apart. But, what is happening is people are finding, and I count myself very fortunate, people are finding partners who they can carry on down this path with, and there's a mutually supportive relationship to enable this to progress. But so having that balance is very important, and it's also very important, to be comfortable with people so that if you do go off on a particular tangent or blind alley, that there's somebody there who can tell you that you're actually talking a load of bollocks.
Right. Yes.
and force you to sort of actually, reflect on where you're at. To put it in perspective, I think, it is very, very important that we do as much as possible to stay real.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And I think you're right there. Just talking with someone about it, that's very important. And as you say, of course, there are those who are, unfortunate that don't have that, possibility, so to speak. People that are in one way or another are kind of isolated and feel that that's difficult. But again, it's all kinds of ways that you can do it now. You can do it online, search up people there. There's all kinds of ways these days to get some kind of contact, and it's very good to just talk and get it out. And it's to say you can bounce things back and forth as well with other people. You can, if you sit down and talk to yourself, in many cases, the person you're talking with is actually like a mirror in a way, and what you're saying comes back to you, and you can hear if it's reasonable or not. So it's very healthy,
On the other part of this, of course, and we've not really sort of gone into it too much, but the other part of this is it does go hand in glove, obviously, very much with the spiritual journey.
Yes.
And fortunately, again, more and more people are, especially at this particular juncture, are tapping into this. And I think, my own perception is that many perhaps even millions of souls have returned to this physical realm at this juncture because of its significance. You know, when you think that just not even 100 years ago, the global